This past weekend, I joined a couple of our team members out at our Conyers dealership to take the On-Road Riders motorcycle license course. Working at Mountain, your motorcycle license can be a really helpful tool to have because obviously it's what we sell. So it was really fun to get out there with a couple other team members that didn't have theirs yet, have fun doing it. Going into this, one of my main concerns was definitely my size in relation to a motorcycle. I'm pretty short and kind of small, and so the idea of getting up on a street bike where I couldn't touch the ground or something was definitely a little bit scary. But when we got there, they had a ton of different bikes and they put you on a bike that worked best for you, and there were a lot of options. I could touch the ground, but it wasn't so small, it wasn't so heavy. I was worried that it was going to be a one-size-fits-all, and it wasn't. Going into this, I had never ridden on-road, nor did I have any kind of knowledge about it. I did have a little bit of a leg up because of my dirt bikes. I understood the controls, the front brake, rear brake, shifting, all that, but they do walk us through it for those that, you know, are totally fresh to this type of machine.
Ignition switch, everybody find their key. The new bikes, they have two-stage chokes. Pull it all the way out when it's very cold, and then when it warms up a little bit, you push it halfway, and then finally all the way in. Okay, folks, everybody look at the shiny pipes on the side of your bike. That's your exhaust pipes, don't touch them.
We started off with the friction zone. It's just that place where your clutch isn't completely out, but it's out enough that you're moving, you're using your throttle just a little bit. You're not going super fast, but you're starting to get a feel for how the motorcycle moves.
We're gonna ease out the clutch, we're gonna pause, and then we're gonna squeeze it back in. Go ahead and get back on your heels, ease the clutch into the friction zone, and then squeeze it back in.
It was good to get a feel for the friction zone and, you know, where that clutch needs to be, because the clutch was a little bit heavier than I had expected it to be on, you know, it's a little bit lighter on my dirt bike and on other things that I've ridden. But it was a really good place to start because it's just, you're getting a feel for the motorcycle without any risk, without putting your feet up or giving it too much gas or going too fast. You're just kind of getting a feel for the motorcycle before we step into the other areas. For the starting and stopping drill, they had cones set up around the oval in the parking lot, and we would just go probably about 15 feet and then stop at a cone, and then do the same thing over and over just to get a feel for starting and stopping smoothly and safely and correctly. You're starting to use the bike a little bit, but your legs are down. You're kind of using those for balance. For the next exercise, we started to use the shifter a little bit, learn how to shift up into second. And that one was, I kind of thought it would be a little bit easier for me than it ended up being because I shift on my dirt bike all the time. But this shift lever was just a little bit different, as they are on all bikes, and it wasn't quite set up the way mine is, so I had a hard time getting it up into second through a neutral. I kept kind of hitting a false neutral, but I guess that's why you practice, because it's different than how I thought it was going to be. And this is where it started to feel like we were really riding the bikes. You know, we're getting up in a second, we're getting some speed, we're starting to really work with the bike and its controls. So it started to really feel like we were riding the motorcycles, which is not something that I thought I would be doing this soon. So it was exciting. For the next drill, we started to do some weaving. Now that we were a little bit more comfortable riding the bikes in a straight line and starting and stopping them, we started to kind of move the bikes around, which is kind of a lot when you're on a bike that you don't expect. They're heavy, they're a lot, but it was actually really fun. It felt a little bit more like I feel on my dirt bike when I get a little bit wobbly. So it was fun to go between the cones and learn about how to shift your weight to keep that bike up, because on the road, it's a lot more important to keep the bike up than it is on the dirt. If you fall, it's a little bit more of an ordeal on the road. Then we started to work on being in second and then starting to kind of lean into turns and figure out where our weight needs to be to keep the bike upright when it's leaning. That was definitely good for me to do because turning and cornering is one of my biggest weaknesses on my dirt bike, so I definitely even think that that'll help me on off-road. This is definitely when I started to feel most comfortable on the bike. I felt like I was shifting, I was controlling the bike well, and then I was also moving the bike well. It had a lot to do with where you're looking and where your head and eyes are, but it was definitely one of the biggest differences that I saw between when I started and when I finished. Balancing on the motorcycle that I was on, at least, was actually easier than I had anticipated. Balancing on my dirt bike is a little bit tough. It's thin and it's very agile. It moves around a lot. It's taller up. This one, I could touch the ground and it was heavy, so it was really sturdy, and the balance actually was easier than I had anticipated. Quick stops are definitely important when you're riding on the road. I imagine that there are a lot of things that are unexpected or out of your control, and you have to stop and you have to be able to stop safely. So that was definitely a very important one to be learning. That one wasn't super difficult because I make a lot of mistakes off-road, so I have to quick brake often. But I will say that one of the biggest differences is that they push you to use both brakes all the time at the same time, and I don't really do that on my dirt bike. I am very heavy on the back brake and hardly ever use that front brake. On my dirt bike, the front brake is just pretty harsh, and I never really have to, not never, but I don't usually have to use it. Last time I used my front brake for a quick stop, I went over my handlebars. Dirt bike, it's just a little safer to use my back brake, and I just don't use my front brake all that often. When you have more speed, you don't need as much balance. The slower you're going, the harder it is to balance. So it's tough to get that speed up from a stop to make that tight turn a little bit easier balance-wise. So it definitely was kind of using that friction zone to get the RPMs up before the turn, and then using that to carry you through the turn without losing your balance. I definitely think that a tight turn would be a little bit harder and more nerve-wracking if you're on a bigger bike, or maybe a bike that's a little bit too big for you sometimes. And I definitely think that the tight turns, as well as a lot of the other skills, would be really hard if you have zero off-road experience. But we walked through all of it really slowly and thoroughly, so I think anybody could do it. I just think getting on the right bike and getting those skills down before you move up is important. To end off day one, we got kind of a demonstration of what happens if you hesitate, or what the consequence of hesitation is. So the instructor rode up to the cones and then started braking, and then we saw where his bike stopped. And then he went back, and we had to guess where his bike would stop if he started braking 1.5 seconds after the cone. If you're going at a higher speed and you still hesitate the same way that you would at a lower speed, the consequence is just that much bigger. We need to be searching and anticipating obstacles and anything that could come in our way so that we can react as quick as we possibly can, because that 1.5 seconds, or however long it takes us to realize that something's wrong or something needs to be changed, it can change the outcome drastically. So it definitely taught us to be aware and be focused on what's going on so that we can anticipate and react as soon as we can to try and reduce the risk. After day one, I'm feeling a lot more confident on the bike than I thought I would be. I came into this never having ridden a street bike, never having ridden really anything that wasn't a dirt bike, and I was a little bit nervous about a lot of things, and I think I got on the right bike. We went at the right pace. We learned a lot, and by the end of the day, I wasn't hitting wheelies or doing burnouts or anything, but I felt very confident and comfortable on the bike and ready for day two in a way that I didn't dread it, I wasn't nervous, I wasn't scared of anything. I was ready and confident and comfortable. Day two started with our written test, which I don't want to brag or anything, but I did get 100 on it. We started the exercises with doing some U-turns, which I was surprised at how comfortable I actually ended up being doing those. So we started off in kind of a bigger box, and once we got smooth in that, we could move to a smaller box, which was a little bit tougher and a little bit more intimidating because it was pretty tight U-turns. But by the end of the day, those also just happened really smooth. The more I figured out how to turn my head, look where I was going, lean the bike better, those ended up going pretty smooth by the end of the day too, which I didn't really expect when I first saw them.
Abby's got it. Look at her go.
For the next exercise, we were going around corners, so we were leaning the bike and turning, and then at the end of the curve, we had to bring the bike back up and come to a pretty quick stop, just in case we ever were going around a corner or a turn on the road and there was some kind of an obstacle or something in the way and we needed to stop quickly while the bike was leaned over. That was important and definitely a little bit scary at first because there was a lot to think about when you've got the bike leaned over and you have to square it up, clutch, back brake, front brake, do all those things all at the same time really quickly was a lot. So at first it was just a lot to think about, and by the end of it, it started to feel more natural and it was kind of muscle memory, and I was stopping quicker and quicker throughout the day, and by the end of the day I was able to stop pretty quickly out of a turn. There you go. The next one was curve judgment. We had to figure out quickly and on our own how we needed to enter a curve after speeding up on the straightaway, kind of getting up into second, picking up some speed on the straightaway, and then figuring out how we need to go into that curve to take it smoothly. And it was good because we were kind of able to do it for ourselves, figure out how we felt most comfortable and what gear and everything. And so for me, I felt most comfortable to stay in second and brake a little bit going into it and then kind of gas it through the turn, because it's kind of how I do it on my dirt bike, so that's what felt most natural to me. Next, we worked on merging into traffic, so we kind of had a few people going around the track and then you would have to go in between them without messing yourself or anybody else up. And that's obviously a very important one when you're riding on the road. You have to understand how to ride with other motorcycles and other cars and everything. Having to glance back is a little bit weird on a bike, because on our dirt bikes we're always told don't look back, never turn around. So to look back when you're on two wheels and you're working on balancing and working the clutch and everything is kind of a lot. And then once you look back and you see that you have a gap, you just don't have super long to be going, because you don't just hit the gas, you gotta let out the clutch. So it's a little bit weird to look back and then turn around and you've gotta go. You almost have to start going before you even can turn around, because you don't know what else might come around a corner or something. Crossing an obstacle was a fun one for me as an off-road rider. What was funny is that they tell you to stand up on the bike, which is what we do on off-road, but my bike was a little bit more of a cruiser type style and the foot pegs were kind of out in front of me. So when I went to stand up, I was like, I don't really know how to stand up on this thing. It was a little bit weird to go over something without that suspension that you have on a dirt bike. Sometimes things will come out of nowhere, or there's something that you couldn't have anticipated, or you forgot to anticipate and search and something happens quicker than you thought it was going to. So you have to swerve. That's a weird one to learn, because it seems like you're learning to do something that you shouldn't have to do, but you definitely will have to do. The thing with swerves is that they happen quickly. They're kind of an emergency situation. And when you're turning your handlebars on a motorcycle, there's a lot that needs to go into that with braking and using your clutch and getting in the friction zone and stuff. So when you're swerving, you don't have time to do all that, but you have to lean, and you have to lean fast without losing balance. So the last thing that we practiced before our skills test was kind of a skills practice for the test, and it kind of put everything together into one loop. We were doing some S-turns, some U-turns, some tight turns, some starting and stopping, and at this point, it was all about just putting everything we'd learned together. You know, we had learned everything individually, and I think we all were feeling pretty comfortable on our bikes and doing these skills, so it was just putting it all together before we had to do it for the test, and this was fun because it was busy and it kind of did everything at once, but we were ready for it. At this point, we were nearing the end of day 2. We were nearing the end of the course. We had done so much work on these bikes, so this is kind of as confident as I was going to feel on this bike. So during the skills practice, I kind of just got to try some things out, see how fast I could do certain things, just getting that technique down before the test.
Good job.
Last up was the skills test. This is like the test that you would take if you went to the DMV to get your motorcycle license. Step 1 of the test was to weave in and out of cones, which was one of my favorite things that we did on the bike all day, so that was pretty fun. And then we went into the box, and we did the little box this time and did one U-turn. That also went pretty well because we had practiced it earlier. I had practiced in the big box and the small box, so I was ready for that. Step 2 of the test, we did a tight turn from a stop, which again was one that was a little bit trickier earlier in the day, but after working on it for that long and getting all the skills down, we were all able to do that. And then we went into another U-turn, which again, we had practiced that a whole lot, so we were all ready for that. So started at a stop, tight turn into a U-turn, and we all nailed it. Step 3 of the test was a quick stop. So we had to start at the cones and then get up to 12 to 18 miles an hour and do a super quick stop at the next set of cones. And this one went well because we had worked on it in several exercises prior, but I also get a little bit sketchy on my dirt bike sometimes and have to do some quick stops. That one went well and everybody stopped and it was good. Skills test number 4, we started to kind of test for an emergency situation. We had to do a quick swerve and then a quick stop. So we started at the cones, got up to 12 to 18 miles an hour, and then did a quick swerve to another lane of cones, and then had to do a quick stop at the next cone. If there's something in the way or something comes out of nowhere, you gotta swerve out of the way and then stop. That one definitely takes a lot of brain power, because for the swerve you can't be on the brakes or else you'll fall. So you can't be on the brakes for the swerve, but then you gotta get right onto the brakes for the stop. But it went well, and it was good. The last part of the test was curve anticipation, getting ready to go into a curve at the right speed and in the right lane position to hit it perfectly. And so we started at the cones on the curve, went around the curve and on the straightaway, got up to about 12 to 18 miles an hour. A lot of us got up into second gear then, and then slowing down and positioning ourselves to take that next curve well. And that one was fun. It was just like a big loop, and it was fun. It kind of put everything together, and it was a good way to wrap it up. I can say that I learned so much in the last 2 days. Coming into this class, I had no idea what to expect, but I had never ridden a motorcycle before. I didn't even really think I ever would, and I didn't know what to expect. I didn't even know what bike I was going to be on, and by the end of day 2, I felt comfortable on the bike. I felt comfortable with the rules of the road and understanding the bike, and obviously I felt most comfortable on the bike that I was put on, but I also felt confident that I could figure out a lot of other bikes just based on the general knowledge that we learned. And by the end of the day, we had all passed our written test, we all passed our riding test, and we're all ready to go get our license. There were definitely nerves at some point, but I actually never really felt very uncomfortable. I felt like we moved at a really good pace, and there were 2 instructors there that were super thorough and supportive and careful, and we moved at just the right pace. We didn't do anything that we weren't ready to do, so I was nervous about some things, but I never really felt uncomfortable. I always kind of felt ready for what we were doing. I highly recommend taking the On-Road Riders course. I can't imagine doing this process without those 2 days of training. If you're interested in getting in on a class, you can visit their website, onroadriders.com, and sign up for a class today. This was a super exciting thing for me to do. I got to do it with some of our team members from other dealerships, and it was a really cool 2 days. Very fun experience, and thank you guys for watching and coming along with me.